But for right now, we're going to ask Nick to come back up and begin round 2 of our discussion portion, where we pick it out of a hat. Now, we've been told by some notes here that some people are having trouble hearing, so we're going to try and talk a little more directly into the mics. And if you guys over in the peanut gallery could enunciate and kind of lean into the mic a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Sure.
And since I kind of been floating around between here and there, I'm going to center this a little more.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
I love it.
Here we go. You ready? Best haunted house film.
Oh dear.
I mean, for me, that's easy. 1963 is The Haunting.
Yeah, well, The Haunting. Okay, yeah. Well, you can't really beat that. I mean, because you and I talked about this.
Yeah, Legend of Hell House.
Legend of Hell House and Shirley Jackson and
Mm-hmm.
The Haunting. Funny, I'm a big movie poster collector, and there's a French one panel of The Haunting that I'm seriously considering buying. It's a few $100s, but it's absolutely exquisite. I will send you a picture. But the French one panel is 47 by 63, so they're massive and very, very, very expensive to frame. So you really need to love the poster. Let's see here. What was it, best or favorite?
It said best.
Best.
But you know what? I'll accept either answer.
Yeah. So I mean, if we're using the criteria of best, I'm inclined to agree with Mike that The Haunting is probably the prototypical haunted house film. There are some from the 30s and 40s that I admire greatly as well. But favorite, yeah, it's got to be The Shining.
Really?
I mean, Shining's also a ghost story, but it's also a ghost story wedded to a sort of haunted house. In this case, a hotel.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw that in the theater as a 10-year-old, and I've never been right ever since, I think. So,
yeah, that definitely has a lasting impact.
There are others. I mean, we just talked about The Uninvited, the 1940s version, which is a haunted house film. So I mean, if I don't over massage it and think about it too much, I think The Haunting and then The Shining probably become. Oh, and then and then there's Fun Factor, and I'll go Hausu, the Japanese film House, which is such a.
That's the movie. That's the movie that I reviewed that had the cult following.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just reviewed that about a week or two ago.
Oh, I love that movie. I haven't watched that review. I got to watch it when I get home.
That was incredible in its own way.
Isn't it that we watched that in cult movies? Yeah. Because it was in the cult movie syllabus.
Yeah. That was actually proving to be a little bit difficult for me to actually analytically score and review because just...
What criteria do you use?
Yeah, exactly. Because I can take... context of, time period and take context of region and so forth. What I can't do is necessarily say that because this is a cult movie, that inherently makes it a high score.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
But I have to, especially pitting it up against other movies, when I saw the flaws and all the technical things and all the rotoscoping bleed through that happened with that, I got to judge it fairly. So that proved a little difficult, but I really do.
In terms of concept,
for the record, I did love the movie.
Yeah, as a sort of, if you're using sort of artistic standards to look at the film, it's kind of off the chart. It's a pop cult mix, and I haven't watched it in 5 or 6 years, but it was, this was very big on the bootleg market back in the 90s. There was no real. I mean, Toho ultimately is who had is the distribution company that had the print. But it just kind of sat forever. They were going to do a laser disc at one point that fell through, and then they were, Criterion and Janus were trying to put it out. But ultimately, as we all know, it got its release on DVD and then later Blu-ray by Criterion. From an artistic standpoint, it's like I said, it's a pop culture, blotter. Right. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it. Although trying to apply logic to it and really understand any narrative is kind of a pointless endeavor. Mm-hmm. That's not your best strategy for watching that movie.
No, definitely not. Now, I want to say that, the best horror movie, in my opinion, is 1963's The Haunting, probably a close second of The Legend of Hell House with Roddy McDowall.
I know you love that.
Yeah. But my favorite, I'm going to have to actually choose something completely different and say Abbott and Costello's Hold That Ghost.
Hold That Ghost, yeah. I mean, now you're preaching to the choir, Mike, because I am the the biggest Abbott and Costello fan. Like, you know, you can't, and I know you are too.
Yeah.
But Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is my favorite film of all time. You know, and that's a question I get asked a lot, especially when you carve out a career that's cinema based somewhat, and they say, "What's your favorite film of all time?" And then you say Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. You know, college students of today's generation aren't familiar with Abbott and Costello, and
which is just a darn shame.
Which is a shame. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they know who's on first. They from a pop culture reference, they know that expression. But what's going on in the peanut gallery? Is my fly down or something like that?
No. Okay, so it's like watching a video game where two characters are getting to know each other and like the hearts start bubbling over the head. Like you two talking together are just it's like it's like watching two Sims get to know each other.
Well,
and it's going well.
Achievement.
As soon as I have Mike over to my house, which will be very soon, he'll see all my Abbott and Costello paraphernalia.
Oh dear God, we'll never get him back.
Yeah. So Hold That Ghost, unfortunately, paper for Hold That Ghost, whether it's the original U.S. campaigns or the later real art stuff, is very pricey. You know, like a lobby card for Hold That Ghost is many hundreds, and then the posters are in the thousands. That's not the case with a lot of Bud and Lou. Just certain films, Hold That Ghost, Buck Privates, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Those three films, just in the thousands. You know,
my first experience with them was actually Africa Screams.
Yeah.
Which
got,
I believe
Shemp in that, and
Shemp and Ned. No, not Ned Beatty.
Joe Besser.
Yeah,
Joe Besser. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you gun to my head, what's my favorite haunted house movie? That would be it.
Hold That Ghost.
It was so much fun.
Has anybody seen Hold That Ghost?
I actually don't think so. I've seen Frankenstein. Did we? Wait, was that the one? Did we watch that in the marathon?
It's so good.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you have to kind of like Bud and Lou to begin with, you
right?
know, but even if you don't, you'll still enjoy it.
So I mentioned that I had an offshoot of my marathon, which was the Effed Up-a-thon. I also have a third one that I do called
Poops.
Yeah, Poops and Giggles, where we're trying to keep this channel clean. So
never mind all the blood and gore.
That's right. But yeah, it's a marathon in which I stagger comedy and horror, and I try to make the comedy horror themed. So that's when we get the Tucker and Dale versus Evil and so on and so forth. So yeah, I believe at one of the Poops and Giggles marathons,
I want to say it
was Abbott and Costello's Hold That Ghost. And I mean, it had the thing with the candle.
Yeah, the movie Candle.
Okay, yep,
the moose head. I mean, it's not. It ultimately, this is a spoiler, but hey, it was made in 41.
Yeah,
you're a little late.
Statute of limitations is up.
It's actually not a supernatural tale, but it's so good, and it's when I say 41, I'm guessing it might be 42, but it's very early in their career, and it establishes that long-standing relationship they have with the supernatural, because they come back and revisit it in the time of their lives. They come back and revisit it and meet Frankenstein
over and over.
Meet the killer Boris Karloff, meet the Mummy, meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and oftentimes those will be multiple villains in the same movie. Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein has just everybody in it, from what I recall.
If you notice, if you go to the index of my book there, and everything I've ever written, all my journal articles and stuff like that, the very first thing listed is always in the notes or in the index or in the bibliography, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And the book I'm working on right now, which is about German thrillers called Krimis, it's going to be hard to fit it in, but I will find a way to get that movie into the book so that when you go to the index, the very first thing you'll see is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Okay. All right. So,
what about comments from you guys? What are
favorite
your
horror
favorite
movies?
or best haunted house?
Yeah, haunted house, right.
Most impactful for me was Amityville Horror.
Oh,
just
sure.
because
Original or remake?
Saw that in the
Original.
theater.
I watched that by myself while I was babysitting a 9-year-old when I was 12, I think, and ended up having to stay up until their father got home because I was freaked out by the windows. I am still freaked out by mirrors and windows because of that movie. Even though it's not even that scary to me now.
No, but just the architecture of those windows.
Yeah, it's just something about them. It just messes with my head still to this day.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that too. Just it's not. It's not one of my absolute favorites because some of it, especially with being, how old it is, some of it's kind of dated. And there are a few scenes like when they're fleeing the house and the pig, and it's like, okay, that's a little cheesy. I mean, I get it, but then you get scenes like when the priest was trying to bless the house, and
Rod Steiger.
Yeah, and he got locked in the room, and all of a sudden it starts swarming with flies, and he starts getting sick, and it's just like, it's effective. It's.
I was
not,
in the theater when I saw that. My friend's father took me and my friend Mike, and we were so young. We were 8 years old. We shared the same chair in the movie theater. And that's the scene I remembered the most. The flies and Rod Steiger.
That's the one that sticks out to me the most in that film because the priest was so shaken from it. I mean, being I was raised Catholic. I mean, I know, with priests, they're very devout people. So for one to be so thoroughly terrified of a house that he wouldn't go back to it, he doesn't return the woman's calls, he wants nothing to do with it after that. It's telling. It's like, okay, there must be something really evil there to have shaken him to the point where his faith couldn't even protect him. He could not handle it. He had to leave. It's just. Like I didn't watch the original first. I watched the remake first. With
remake?
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, I think it's the one with the girl. She has the bullet hole in the head, and the finger goes through. Mm-hmm. That one freaked me out because it was more modern. The special effects were better, and I was younger, so I was more impressionable. So when I watched the original, it was like, oh well, this isn't nearly as. I don't want to say gory, but it's not nearly as shocking after watching the remake. But the remake, so little of it stands out in my memory compared to the original because I think it's one of those times where there's so many movies in that franchise for one, and I've only seen the two, honestly. Other ones, becomes a point where I think it's just too much of a shameless cash grab. And I mean, I know it's one of the most famous haunting stories, in modern times.
This is something that I found when I was doing the Puppet Master thing was somebody asked me if the Puppet Master franchise, when I was going through it and I was just committed to doing all of them, getting them out of the way, somebody asked me if it was the largest franchise ever done. Because I was saying, 13 movies. I'm like, that's a lot. Is that the most? It couldn't be. And I started looking into it some more, and I even made a spreadsheet, started tallying them up. That was actually the most quantity of movies in any franchise I could possibly think of, with one exception. Yeah, with one exception, and that was the Amityville series. But Amityville is a town, and you really, it's not a licensed franchise. So, you got the windows. Point. So that was what I found is, there's more entries in the Amityville series, but then you're dealing Amityville Dollhouse, Amityville Asylum, Amityville, train tracks, who knows? So the fact that it isn't a licensed franchise, I didn't count it. And I said, yes, Puppet Master is the most movies in any licensed franchise I could think of.
I should probably, just so we get on the same page, go back and watch some Puppet Masters. When Full Moon was doing their thing in the 90s, people were kind of either in the subspecies lane or the Puppet Master lane.
Yeah.
And I was in the subspecies lane, and there's a little crossover, and I was really doing the whole subspecies. And, which I enjoyed immensely. That's a fun franchise too.
Well, they were also doing Demonic Toys.
And I didn't even bother with that one.
Yeah,
I was like, it was already kind of, grade Y or X type stuff, well, I'm not going to say Z, they had some budget and they had a few. Didn't Shatner's daughter was in some of those movies. So they had like the offspring of a star. I need to go back because you clearly have a lot of love for the Puppet Master franchise. It's just you have to suss out which ones are worth my time.
Yeah. Well, actually, on that note, if you go to RotD-Reviews.com, you can look up an aggregate list of all the reviews that I've done and the scores, so you can filter out and look for all the Puppet Master movies and then categorize them by top score. Some of them were pretty horrible. Yeah. Well, thank you, Nick, for joining us. Actually, I'm going to pop over to the Peanut Gallery here so that they can talk about their favorite haunted house movies, if anybody else hasn't chimed in yet.
I'm trying to think. It's hard.
I'm trying to think too because Amityville is that's the first one that comes to mind.
That's classic.
That's always the first one that comes to mind, but that is not my favorite.
It's not mine
And
either.
No.
The Shining was awesome,
What's
and
the one we watched?
The Gacy Getman House.
Yeah, okay.
It was
The
a home style-
Gacy Getman House.
It's a home style movie.
oh
He was talking about it for a while there.
yeah.
It was enough. It was enough that it was okay to have a decent movie, but obviously, like every other.
There was that one, and there was the one that was in Connecticut. Was that the same one, or was that?
The Haunting. in
Yeah,
Connecticut.
yeah,
that was
was-
a good
yeah.
one.
That one was
That
decent.
one,
Wait,
that one
is-
I liked.
Is that the one where at the end like the bodies in the walls and all that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that
Yes,
is
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
That one was good.
That's the one I was
Yeah,
sitting here
yeah,
trying to think
based
of
on-
too. I was like, what the heck was
But
the
I-
name
but I-
of that thing?
Would
But
you
yeah.
consider 13 Ghosts a haunted house flick?
I would.
Or...
I would,
The
yeah.
house is such an important character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because
it
that
absolutely
was
is.
actually a really well done film. Like,
The architecture of the house though was the star
It
of that.
was.
It was the most fascinating thing.
Right.
And I loved the unique spirits. They each had their
Yeah.
own story. I mean, I know it's kind of schlocky by today's standards, and even it was never exactly a big hit, but
You're
it's
talking about the
not-
original or the remake? Or both?
I think it's
the remake, I
It's
think,
the remake,
is the one
I
that I
think.
saw.
yeah, it's got to be the remake. It's the one with Matthew Lillard. I
Mhm.
think he played Shaggy.
I like them both immensely.
I haven't seen the
I don't
original.
think I've seen the
honestly.
original.
That's
It's
William Castle. It's good stuff.
Oh, I
Um,
need to see the original.
House on Haunted Hill is another
Yeah.
really, really good one. Classic.
I am
Vincent Price.
I am almost ashamed to
I like
admit
that too.
I haven't either.
I am almost ashamed to admit that the original House on Haunted Hill I watched probably about a year ago, so not too awful long ago, and it actually scared me.
It's good. It's legitimately good.
When the-
That movie is terrifying.
Yeah, when she comes out.
Oh my lord.
Like
That
Little
actually
skateboard,
really
they-
got
they
me.
roll her out on.
yeah, despite
And then she did the wheelie over.
no, some of these older films, despite the lack of effects, despite the the age of them, they can be really terrifying.
Yeah.
Like they mess with you. They can stick with you.
Mhm.
It's-
All right. So we want to thank Nick for joining us here. If I think he has to take off in a little while,
Yeah.
But,
Oh, wow,
uh,
all right.
you're more than
but yeah, feel free to stick around. And I want to thank Patty's Pub in Hornell for making this possible to have Nick here with us. Thank you very much. If you're in the Hornell area, you want some good eats, Patty's Pub is a really great way to go. Their wings are amazing.
Lots of awesome beer on tap, too. Just saying.
Yep.
True.